Championship weekend is come and gone. Notre Dame was idle and lost. Alabama played, was bludgeoned on the field and on the scoreboard, but they won. BYU played similarly to Alabama, paid a mighty price, and Duke won, but then sacrificed itself as tribute to the altar of the group of five. That about covers it for the weekend. Welcome to Irish Illustrated Insider. I'm Tim O'Malley, joined by Tim Priester of Irish Illustrated, John Bryce of Football Scoop, and Pete Sampson of The Athletic. Pete, I want to start with you regarding the events of December 7, 2025, a date which will live in head-shaking bewilderment for the Irish fan.
Yeah, I think that I everybody when you saw Alabama pop up at 9, you're like, oh boy, this
Yeah.
this is taking a turn for the dark, and it did. And there, as I wrote on The Athletic today, there is a lot of blame to go around. Notre Dame is not totally absolved from that, but it has to start with the dog and pony show, with the CFP rankings and kind of the disingenuous nature of all that, with Hunter Yurachek being a mouthpiece for it. So that there's no other place to start but there with, and I give Kirk Herbstreit credit for calling it misleading and a mistake that ESPN does these shows, because I think after this round of them, pretty much everyone would agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, Tuesday night was when we all started to realize that, okay, something is not right here. And the two things were that, Alabama and Notre Dame had flip-flopped, and the positioning of BYU between Notre Dame and Miami, it just seemed like this is all too coincidental and everything is falling into place at this moment in the last vote before the conference tournaments. And it proved correct. And JB and I, we talked about it Thursday morning before I wrote a column, and and JB was on a local TV show the night before, and the signs were there that this was not going to go Notre Dame's way. The committee had said all along that Notre Dame and Miami weren't comparable. When they are comparable, then it's a different story. And suddenly they became, quote, comparable. It was like they were making up rules as they went along, but they became comparable before the last vote, and it was like, this is not good, because that made the Texas Tech BYU game, moot. If BYU lost, they were out of there, and Miami was going to move up, and if BYU won, that would bump Notre Dame. So the writing was on the wall earlier in the week, and the committee followed through with. I mean, Notre Dame was robbed. This team absolutely belongs in the playoffs. I realize that Tulane and James Madison being in it is a significant part of the complication of it. But the committee deceived Notre Dame, and Notre Dame has every right to be beyond disappointed, to be angry about the way the process was handled.
Thought that an Alabama close loss might keep the Tide at number 9. I did not realize that Alabama being essentially non-competitive would keep the Tide at 9, while BYU actually performed much more admirably, particularly through the first half. It scored on its opening possession. It has 7-0 lead. It was only 13-7 at halftime. BYU had possession in the third quarter, driving before a turnover with a chance to take the lead. BYU was punished. Alabama was not. I appreciate CT on Twitter for noting that 86 of 88 previous conference championship game losers had dropped for losing in the rankings for losing their conference championship game. The only one other than Alabama that did not drop was TCU in 2022, and that's because the Horned Frogs lost 31-28 in overtime to number 10 Kansas. Again, 31-28 in overtime. Alabama was bludgeoned. Alabama had -3 rushing yards. Alabama only had 209 yards, I think, of total offense. I thought that Alabama would drop to 10, that Notre Dame could inch to 9, that would keep the separation. But clearly, I just very firmly believe there was no scenario that was going to unfold over the last 10 days or so that if Virginia didn't win the ACC would be left out of the tournament. I just think that collectively, those 17 brands trumped the probably strongest brand in college football, that is Notre Dame.
Virginia Hurt, you said 2 weeks ago on this podcast that they will not shut out the ACC over Notre Dame. You stated that, John Bryce. Virginia wins. They had a chance to not shut out the ACC over Notre Dame, of course. I agree with you. At some point during the Texas Tech BYU game, I texted our staff thread and said it was 21-7 and they were driving, as you mentioned, BYU, and I said to myself and to you guys, 24-14, 27-14 puts BYU right in between Notre Dame and Miami. Then it got a little worse, and you realized they were going to fall a little more. But when that happened to Alabama, it didn't cross my mind that they would stay ahead of Notre Dame when they just got absolutely handled by Georgia. If you're talking about gutsy calls on 4th and 2, their only touchdown came on a 2-penalty drive with a late hit. They should have had 0 points in that game if we're going to start drilling down to things. But Pete Bavach was just on Dan Patrick, and he said, we felt we had zero wiggle room, obviously meaning when they were 0-2. We felt we did all we needed thereafter. Turns out we never had a chance. And I think that is, we'll hear from Pete tomorrow. The press conference is now official. We'll be hearing from Pete Bavach tomorrow at noon at Notre Dame.
I understand, the notion about not overly penalizing the losing team in the conference championship game, but you have no reason, if you're going to do what you just did with Alabama, why are you even playing the game? Because they were awful. They were bad throughout November. They're not a team. They can't run the football. We talked about this in the last podcast we did. They can't run the football, which means they can't win the line of scrimmage. If you can't win the line of scrimmage, you're not even a viable playoff team. You don't have a chance to win the national title. It's
Tim, what I think hurts a little in the age of losing conference championships and not mattering is it's not like Alabama. I mean, Alabama deserved it just as much as someone else, but Alabama didn't run through their conference. Alabama didn't play Texas A&M. Alabama didn't play Texas. I know all the teams didn't play someone, but it's not like, okay, Alabama and Georgia are the two best teams in the best conference. Right. They're going to fight it out.
They were the number 1 seed in the conference, which is crazy.
But Pete, they didn't play Texas A&M, who had 1 loss. They didn't play Texas, the only team that had 2 losses, that lost to Georgia and a bad game, but also lost to Ohio State. I mean, you could argue Alabama didn't deserve to be in that game, just like A&M didn't deserve to be in that game, just like Georgia, had they lost to someone else, wouldn't have been in that game. It's a weird conference setup now that you don't play. And it's not like they're the only team that didn't play the best teams, but they don't even play each other.
Every team in the ACC that didn't play Miami, of which
there
were many.
Yes. It's it's obviously the conference. The setup is what's going to be the biggest problem. We have a lot of topics to get through here. So I thought Bavacqua made a good point. He represented Notre Dame pretty well by saying, I want to make clear this isn't about the teams. And he didn't only say Alabama and Miami are good teams. He's like, Vanderbilt's a good team. Brigham Young's a good team. Alabama and Miami are good teams. It's the process. But guys, I think everybody can rail against the process all they want, but why would ESPN stop televising something that everyone's going to watch no matter how much they're being lied to? What are they going to lose? 5%?
I mean, they wouldn't.
Come on.
They're contractually obligated to continue doing it per the CFP rules. However, they're taking a gourmet dinner and serving it to us on a garbage can and telling it's amazing. Yeah. Like it's not. And I hope that somebody can look out for the best interest of the sport and be like, let's stop doing this. Like, let's come to an agreement, like maybe something like the NCAA where at midseason they're like, boom, hey, here's a snapshot of where we are, 6 games, 6 weeks into it. And then we'll see you again after championship weekend. Because I think I think if they did that, Notre Dame probably would still be out. But I also think Notre Dame would probably be playing in a bowl game this month too.
Well, it's like we said in the last podcast, they manipulated the system.
They turned Notre Dame into a plot twist. The entire thing is a TV show, and they reduced Notre Dame to the plot twist in the last episode.
Even right down to announcing, I guess number 9 was up next, but it just seemed like, oh, okay, they're going to put Alabama up there first as the tip. It's like, I mean, I think we all were like, oh crap. Yeah, that's the first name we saw is not the one that you wanted to see. And again, it was Irish Illustrated said this, and then within 48 hours, Pete Bavacqua said the same thing, and Marcus Freeman said the same thing. It's not about Miami, it's about Alabama, and it's the manipulation of the system by flipping Notre Dame 9 and 10. It was like, that was just completely out of the blue. Why did you do that? And then when you saw BYU getting slotted, you knew it was going in that direction. But it was a manipulation of the system. Right on down, Pete, to what you're saying, the show itself on ESPN. And, and the other part of it, I'm surprised Jack Swarbrick hasn't been blamed for this yet, quite frankly, because the fact that there are two group of five teams in it, I mean, he was part of the original crafter of this process. And Tulane and James Madison are going to, they're going to play for the national title, and Notre Dame isn't. It's the system is broken. A lot of it has to do with what I've always said, that there's no perfect system, but man, this one is far from perfect.
Well, and if you hope anything out of this, it's that when Pete appeared on Pat McAfee Friday, he indicated very strongly that there's momentum for a 16-team expanded playoff. Wasn't sure if it could be done by 26 or not, but you would hope that the cluster of this weekend and really the last 10 days spurs more decisive action when they meet next month, rather than continuing to kick the can down the road, because that's not serving anybody any good, and I think that's going to harm the sport. The more, whether it's Notre Dame or anyone else, it's when you have this kind of look, it's just bad on the sport, like Pete alluded to.
For the record, for people who didn't listen to Bavacqua and Dan Patrick, he said he does not think it will be at 16 teams for next year, but is still hopeful down the road.
Yeah, it was interesting that Dan Patrick kind of, well, going to Pete's point about Notre Dame being the plot twist, they're also the sacrificial lamb, as Dan Patrick said. In order for there to be a change, there's got to be a real reason for change. I don't think Florida State, without Jordan Travis getting left out for the 14 playoff, was enough of the region for change there. That just was happening anyway. But this could be. Yeah, I was pretty sure when you said, I want to bring this up because not Hall Jugs Machine said. And we all felt the same way when we saw the Alabama name go up. To those of you who said yesterday that Indy was probably going to get into the college football playoff, number one, what mistake in thinking led you to believe this? And number two, did you learn from that mistake? Mine was that the results of getting your absolute butt kicked would matter, as opposed to, if that was 28-21, I never would have thought Notre Dame was getting in.
Right.
I believe what Hunter Urick said, and I will never do that again.
Yeah. My belief was common sense, a pox upon me, and watching the Vegas markets go from minus 1,200 Saturday to minus 2,000 Sunday morning. I had an agent in New York texting me, sort of, because he just follows it religiously every year, and he was just like, "It's never been wrong. It's never been wrong. It's going to be this." And then, like, literally 30 seconds before they flashed Miami and Alabama on the screen, he texted me and said, "Oh, it's going to be Miami. The market's just changed." And so that's when I looked at his text, and about that same time, moments later, I looked at the TV and I used the same pejorative that he did.
There was I'm sad that the name escapes me. There's an ex-Alabama writer who popped up on Twitter at about 2 a.m, and he wrote, "I correctly predicted the Tide would be in 2024 or 2023. I correctly predicted the Tide would be out in 2024. And I'm telling you all right now, the Tide are in 2025. And I remember reading that and thinking, well, Twitter's not the place to really care, but this is quite a point this guy's making right here. And I have to research his name before we get to segment 2, because by golly, when he tweets next year about what's going on into that Alabama situation, I'm just going to believe him, and that's where the bet can be laid down.
Alabama didn't deserve to be in last year's 12-team playoff,
right.
and neither. I understand that, but to set the record completely straight, Alabama didn't deserve to be in either one of these last two playoffs. As
Pete referenced, Notre Dame has decided to skip its bowl game. That we should just handle that here because we had good 75 questions on that topic. Not number one question level, but quite a few of them on there. All right, let's go through how it was decided, and start off with why. John?
Yeah, that's a great question. I certainly see both sides of it. I do know that right around just literally minutes before 3:30 yesterday afternoon. Coaches started reaching out to players, asking how they felt about the bowl. Did they want to play in a bowl game? About 3:30 moments later, like 5 minutes later or less after the first wave, additional coaches started reaching out to their individual position groups, asking about it and saying, please, we want feedback. We want, keep in mind what's best for the team as you also evaluate your individual options. And then within 17 minutes of those correspondences, Notre Dame issued a press release saying it was declining the bowl invitation. I think Pete's point very early in the show was probably the best one, that if the system hadn't made Notre Dame have tremendous hope, if not outright belief that it would be in, I do think Notre Dame would have handled it differently. I also do think it is very unfortunate for any number of players who 10 days ago, 9 days ago, put on a Notre Dame uniform for the very last time and never fathomed in that moment that it would be the last time they ever put on a Notre Dame uniform. I also think it's unfortunate to miss out on the practice time and the additional development for younger players that would have come with a bowl game.
It's rough. I don't think there's a right answer to play or not play. I respect it more as like a protest vote, if that's what it is. That like basically a middle finger to the system, ESPN and the ACC. I would understand it less as like a hurt feelings vote, but I guess I can appreciate that position as well. I know talking to former players, sort of told like the bowl practices do not carry as much weight as like maybe we think that they do.
I'm glad you brought that up, Pete, because
Yeah.
we've had this discussion a few times with the
Yeah, I was just because I was just like, well, that's one of the things I'm torn about, and I was told by more than one, like, don't be torn about that. That doesn't really make a difference.
It's just one more game prep. I mean, because
Yeah,
the other, you're preparing for a game, so the other guys, the guys that aren't in the rotation, the show teams and stuff, they're not overly benefiting from that, and I get that. That makes sense. Notre Dame turned it down because they've spent the last 2 seasons playing for a national title, and they're not playing for a national title. And I thought Pete Bavacqua had some really poignant comments about, how close knit the team was and what they overcame this year and how they rallied and how they dominated. And then you're telling me you're going to play in a game, and you're going to play in a game without. I thought that was a really key comment, that the captain said that they couldn't imagine taking the field without the team intact. And when you hear that comment, it's like, okay, that now it really settles in. You really understand the magnitude of how it impacts his football team.
right about an hour before I was with three people from inside the program an hour at 2:30, and then I ended up texting JB after this, and I was like, bowl game? And they're all like, I don't know which player in the world is going to want to play in this bowl game. And he started listing off names of non-upperclassmen. That's when I was like, oh, shoot, this is not Jadarian Price, Jeremiah Love. This is young guys that aren't going to want to play in this bowl game. So you got to opt out to just opt out of the bowl game, not to opt out of I'm going to start preparing for the NFL, which is a nice convenience, the wrong word, but which is the direct line to opting out is I'm preparing for the NFL or I'm medically retiring. When you're having young guys that are important players on the team opting out of something like that, well, you don't win either. I mean, no one wants to go coach your JV against BYU and one opt out. You have 16, and let's go line up and play a team that's almost as good.
Because BYU guys, I don't know what the composition of the roster is, but they're probably not opting out because, hey, we just had a great year. We want to build upon this and move into next year. I don't know how many upperclassmen, what have you, but their entire attitude toward playing a game like that would be diametrically opposed to Notre Dame.
And I did want to. Oh, sorry, real quickly, too. I wanted to follow up with this point because I know some people had asked me about it after I tweeted it, and I knew it would be addressed today. So when I said I spoke directly with ACC coaches that said Notre Dame's decision was delaying theirs, first of all, I don't think that's an accident. Maybe I'm wrong, but we heard Pete Bavacqua say this morning on Dan Patrick that the ACC relationship is permanently damaged. But I say that because those bowls have the option of having an ACC team or Notre Dame once it gets to that point. And all those bowls want Notre Dame over any ACC team. So that's why those coaches indicated to me, like, yeah, our league office doesn't know what's happening. I had a coach, I mentioned this yesterday, tell me we may end up playing one of our conference rivals in a bowl game because our league is so messed up right now. And I did want to share those items, but that's why I tweeted that it was, Notre Dame is a brand, which again, that's my point here is the value of the Notre Dame brand. Those bowls have these ACC affiliations. Oh, you get the third place team or you get Notre Dame if it doesn't make the college football playoff. They all wanted Notre Dame. I had somebody tell me the Holiday Bowl was very interested in a potential Notre Dame Arizona matchup. Obviously, we know that the Gator Bowl wanted to, or excuse me, Pop Tart wanted to have Notre Dame BYU. That would have given it the first two teams out of the CFP field into its bowl game and given it an air of legitimacy. So, from that standpoint, I do understand why Notre Dame would decline the invitation and say, no, we're not going to put on a showcase with half of our team against the other team that just missed the field and also lend credence to whatever narrative is out there.
So do you think Notre Dame will never play in another minor bowl game?
I think I'm glad you brought that up. We did have a question on it. I think they won't play in another minor bowl game where they're the 12th best team in the country or 13. You know what I'm saying? I think the Sam
if they went 7-5.
Yeah. Well,
and
I think even like
the
Sam Hartman team, the Sam Hartman team would play if they're invited to go play BYU right now. That would be You would be like, well, Sam, if you're opting out, Steve Angeli's leading us against BYU. I think they would do that.
I think if you're 8-4 or something like that, and going into November, you're starting to play more young players the whole month of November, then you go ahead and you do the bowl game. But otherwise, I think if they feel completely snubbed, the precedent has been set.
And here's the killer. Let's just go with injured players, not including Jeremiah Love. Like Leonard Moore, he was, if he was going to play 4 playoff games, his ankle he would have been missing the whole spring. Like that, his ankle's not prepared for that. Billy Schrauth does not need to go back out in the field until the spring at this point, or if he's getting ready for the NFL. And there's guys we don't know that are also in, like Gabriel Rubio, I'm sure was pushing to get back. Cooper Flanagan. Now these guys absolutely.
Tay Johnson.
Tay Johnson's a great one. I mean, it's an important one too. So,
Caden Greathouse.
That'll probably be a question for segment 2 somewhere along the line. If it's not today, it will be some other day, a segment 2 question. But there's a lot of guys that you're like, all right, I'm going to do everything I can to get ready for this playoff game. And there's nobody that's like, I really want to get ready for the Pop-Tarts Bowl because I watched BYU get hammered by Texas Tech.
We weren't. How about the media? We were all on board going back to Orlando, huh? I mean, we've been on board
going back to Holiday Bowl. I'm upset about that one right now.
Exactly. Orlando, the path from South Bend to Orlando is well worn for the media. I'm not sure that we were all ready to jump back in and fly down there for a game of this lack of magnitude.
Segment 1 was brought to you by the RV Manufactured Housing Hall of Fame in Elkhart, Indiana. In addition to the museum and its various exhibition halls, the campus is open to the public for free camping and is less than an hour from Notre Dame's campus. No reservations required. Whether you're looking to learn more about the history of recreational vehicles in the Kidlin Library or simply a cost-effective, interesting place to stay on your family road trip, the RV Manufactured Housing Hall of Fame can provide exactly what you're looking for. We'll be back with segment 2, Burning Up the Boards. With football season winding down, I've been looking to find the best deals on tickets, both for families and friends, but also as a memorable gift idea. That's why I want to offer the sponsor of today's Burning Up the Boards, SeatGeek, a huge shout out. With over 35 million downloads, SeatGeek is the #1 rated ticketing app. There are more than 70,000 events listed on SeatGeek, including concerts, sports, festivals, and more. So whether you're a fan looking to purchase a ticket to the AC/DC concert in September or any NFL playoff matchup down the road, SeatGeek has your back. Each ticket is rated on a scale of 1 to 10, so you know you're getting a good deal. Look for the green dots. Green means good, red means bad. But every ticket is backed by their buyer guarantee. And of course, I have a code for you guys. You can use Irish10, that's all capital letters of the number 10, for 10% off your next set of tickets at SeatGeek. That's 10% off any tickets with promo code Irish10. Make sure you click the link in the description to download the app and have the code automatically entered to your account so you can use it later. Thank you, SeatGeek. Our first question comes from G Weave. TP, have you ever had as much pushback against one of your articles as you had on this last week's Thursday Thoughts?
I would have to say that in 44 years, nothing has come close to the pushback that I had on Thursday Thoughts. And I went into it, again, as I said, JB and I communicated, and what was obvious to me was that the big steal was about to happen with Alabama. And that the bulk of the story centered around why Notre Dame and Miami should be in ahead of of Alabama. But along that way, I said that I thought Miami should be in ahead of Notre Dame if it just came down to that because of head to head. I didn't think that that was a controversial comment, other than I knew. I mean, people would be upset about about Miami getting in ahead of Notre Dame, but I didn't think the head to head was a real controversial statement. I found out that everything that I wrote about the big steal with Alabama, and pretty much itemized how that was all going to come down. And on Sunday, it was probably going to break against Notre Dame. That was ignored because of what I said about Miami going head to head. I've had some people tell me that I shouldn't have expressed that was my opinion. In 44 years, I would say for the last 35, I've never hesitated to express an opinion. That's how I feel about it. Had Notre Dame beaten Miami and both teams were 10-2 at the end of the season, I clearly would have said Notre Dame should have been in. Had it been Wyoming and Nevada in the same situation, I would have called it the same way. But, I just didn't anticipate the reaction to making that statement. I stand by it. I think the majority of people do believe that head-to-head ultimately should decide it. I know there's a more modern-day version of it, but I think, like my take was called lazy. I don't think it's lazy. I think saying that somebody converted 8 of 13 on third downs should supersede somebody winning the game. Winning's hard. If you've played and you've coached, you know that winning's hard, and I think that kind of diminishes from it. But look, I'm arrogant when it comes to dealing with fans at times. When I read something that I know is incorrect, I'm arrogant about it. My contemporaries that played baseball against me could speak to how arrogant I can be in those situations. For that, I apologize. For the story, absolutely not. That's my job to express opinions on where I think Notre Dame should be, how I think the same way I judged Alabama, I was judging the entire process. So I need to do a better job in dealing with people. But when it comes to that story, I support it. First of all, it was absolutely correct as to what would happen, and me expressing opinion that head-to-head should go to Team A over Team B, I don't think is very controversial. But when it involves Notre Dame and Notre Dame fans, I understand there's going to be a backlash, and I accept that.
I actually disagreed with the take of the Notre Dame Miami thing because there's so many other things that happened in the 99 days since they played. I would go back then it was just a vote, and I think people are getting wrong the 1993 thing, and I think it's been wrong on this. It's been wrong written on Irish Illustrated and on this. It wasn't Notre Dame getting a chance to play Florida State.
That was a different situation. That was not
it was
getting
Notre Dame getting a chance to play Nebraska. They were undefeated. Notre Dame went from 1 to 4. Florida State, when they lost, went from 1 to 2. You could say the penultimate rankings did Notre Dame in there too. They just didn't think they're going to lose to BC. But I want to point out that this happened in the playoff era, the 2-team playoff era, not the 12 or 14 playoff era. In 2000, it took me about 4 seconds to research this. In 2000, Miami, with one loss to a eventual 11-1 Washington team. They lost by 5 at Washington. They beat defending champion Florida State by the convenient score of 27-24 on October 7th. They rolled everyone else all the way through and were number 2 in the country, with Florida State number 3. The computers stepped in, looked at the body of work of Florida State, moved Florida State ahead of both the coaches and AP votes that had Miami at 2. And the computers put Florida State, despite a head-to-head loss with Miami as its only loss, in the national championship game. So head-to-head doesn't always matter. Head-to-head can matter. It didn't matter in 2000. It did matter in 1993 when people were allowed to vote. So I think the modern way of looking at it doesn't have to be right, but it is another way of looking at it.
Oh, I completely understand that. It's not that I disavow that. It's that's what my opinion was on this one situation.
I thought the correct final rankings would have been Miami 9, Notre Dame 10, Alabama 11. I think head-to-head absolutely should matter.
Exactly.
But in early November, I would have said that it mattered less because Miami was not playing good football. And then to Miami's credit, we're allowed to do that. They really turned it on. And I think that they forced the head-to-head issue to matter by closing very strongly at the end of the season. So you
The,
have
the
to at least
committee,
give them some credit for that.
the committee
I-
needed to correct it
Well, I
before
actually-
that, and it was
Yes.
difficult because
Yeah.
Miami had lost two times in 3 weeks. So how are you going to suddenly thrust them ahead of Notre Dame? But what you can't do is what you did to Notre Dame and really the entire process yesterday.
My other problem with this is, and I was maintaining on since the vote started October 31st or whatever, the human beings in the room, if Notre Dame had the exact same schedule and beat USC 34-24 to end the season anywhere in the world, home, away, neutral, they'd be in the playoff right now over Miami, because that would have been their last statement as opposed to the crap that unfolded in November for both teams. I mean, they didn't play. Navy was the only team that was close to being ranked for either team in November. You know, that's tough for Notre Dame. But man, to go from 10 versus 18 week 1 to 5 weeks later, whew, that's a big swing for both teams.
While
beat
Notre Dame,
Pittsburgh.
while Notre Dame is playing, I guess, except for BC, playing great football.
Yeah. Our next question comes from Lefty 5258. There's some smoke on Twitter about Freeman and the Giants and in other prediction markets as well. What is the status on a new contract extension for Marcus Freeman?
It's mine. Go ahead, Pete.
No, I was going to say, Bryce, you start with this one.
It's my understanding that those talks have been ongoing and have been received very well by both sides. I will note that Jay Glazer came out a couple of weeks ago, and he's pretty excellent in his NFL reporting, and he said that he does not expect the Giants coaching search to focus on the collegiate ranks, whether at the time that was Marcus Freeman or Steve Sarkisian or Lane Kiffin. However, I do know with certainty that the Giants have vetted Marcus Freeman and do like Marcus Freeman, but I don't know that I haven't had anybody indicate to me that he's their top candidate. And again, on the NFL stuff, I will always defer to Jay Glazer and what he reported.
I mean, what I was told, similar to that, with the caveat that Freeman had some interest in the Giants. Like, he was Giants curious. That's different than interviewing for the job, however, which I was told he absolutely has not done. And he should be back at Notre Dame next year. I would expect a reworked contract to be done sooner rather than later. I think Notre Dame was sort of waiting or Marcus Freeman was waiting for the market to reset, and then you can figure out how much you should be making, and then that's how much he'll be making. But I think Notre Dame is willing to go up, I would say, in excess of $10 million total on the term of his deal.
And I think it's important. The vetting of Marcus Freeman started after last year. It's not starting now. Now,
Yeah.
to the degree that it is now, probably not, because it was a year earlier and he just done it one time. Now he's gone through and made this one of the best teams in the country, and so the vetting, the interest is going to pick up, and it has.
My low level concern that is higher than what Pete and I had dinner Friday before the Stanford game, and we discussed Marcus Freeman's likely future over stakes. Not with Marcus Freeman, unfortunately, but I mentioned, Freeman has rebuffed interest in the Giants, and Pete was like, there might be a renewed interest in the Giants that you're going to have to rebuff again. And that's when they get a little like, well, if they're not going away and they're that interested, then I think JB, I'm glad that Jay Glazer said that, because the second interest in Marcus Freeman is what I think Notre Dame fans would be concerned about. Because if you rebuff it in mid-November and all of a sudden it exists again on December 7th, 8th, that's not. I guess December 7th, he wasn't thinking about the Giants too much, but December 8th, that was a mild concern. Our next question from Denver Maximus. We are getting back to on the field, kind of. Now that the season is over, what is the biggest accomplishment you saw from the beginning of the season to the end for this team?
For me, I don't know that it's any one thing or one game. It's just the nose to the grindstone attitude that has really taken hold of this program. And it's Marcus Freeman. It's a killer instinct. It's the desire to improve. It's the understanding to how important it is to to practice well during the season. It's being ready to play. The incredible improvement of the defense, the offensive line absorbing some injuries and still playing quality football, not great football, but quality football up front. I mean, for me, it's just an accumulation of this rolling thunder of Notre Dame football. And it, of course, it all starts with Marcus Freeman. But I think the buy-in to it is now really becoming ingrained within this football program.
I think for me, it's probably on a singular level, CJ Carr. I think you have a guy who's burgeoning into a superstar. You finally have an in-house, homegrown, developed quarterback that you're going to have through at least next season, and who knows beyond that. He's on a trajectory to have NFL options following the 26 campaign, but also the fact that you grow and develop him is going to do nothing but help your recruiting, and help you hang on to guys like Teddy Gerard and be in the conversation for prospects of that ilk. So to me, it's that, the program continues to grow, and Notre Dame's left out of the playoffs after 2 losses by 4 total points to power conference teams. I've tried to unofficially do the research. Alabama began and ended its season with road games, but Notre Dame has done it 5 years in a row. 5 years in a row, Notre Dame has began and ended its season away from home. I think that's a disservice to Marcus Freeman and the program and the players. I also thought that Notre Dame should have touted a little bit more that while you rip on our schedule, and I made this point yesterday, we can't control the fact that Stanford, Purdue, and whomever else are just bottles of suckage right now. Like, that's Notre Dame's scheduled power conference people. They played 10 power conference teams, Boise State that was a 24 CFP participant, and 9 to 10 win Navy. All of those other teams, with the exception of Tulane that entered this past weekend in conversation for a playoff bid, played at least one FCS game, every single one of them. So, like I noted, Miami beat Notre Dame and got to have Bethune-Cookman a week later. I understand Notre Dame had the week off, but it didn't have a chance to work out some things against a lesser opponent to get CJ Carr more comfortable, to get him more experience before another brutal game against one of the better defensive minds in college football, and Mike Elko and company. So that's sort of where I take it. I think Marcus Freeman has elevated this program. To me, again, I'm much more of an outsider than you guys, but to me, I think Marcus Freeman has this program on the cusp of 1990s era, early 1990s era Notre Dame football.
Pete, before you give your answer on most impressive, I want to say the all-time farce of the FCS not counting is not true when the committee gets together, because they've never once penalized anybody for not having as many wins as the team in front of them. Alabama has 1 less win than Notre Dame.
It's not even
Miami
discussed.
has 1 less win than Notre Dame. It's not a thing.
It's not a topic.
Total BS that they even bring that up, and they should never say it again. Go ahead, Pete.
I would agree with pretty much everything John said, except I think the schedule and how it's made deserves a lot more scrutiny. Like when I mentioned, like Notre Dame shares some blame in what happened, I think the way the schedule was constructed is a huge part of that. That's probably a different podcast topic for January. But to answer this question from Denver Maximus is, I think Priester's point is spot on. Like, Marcus has done a really good job of figuring out how to like beat human nature, and get college players to play hard and together on games where their focus might not be needed. We see very few Boston College type performances. It's a lot more Navy and Stanford. So that's pretty impressive. Obviously, the defense made major improvements. However, the fact that they needed to make major improvements is a huge concern. And again, this is probably a January podcast topic, but figuring out how you can look at August and know what you're seeing when September starts has got to be a big focus of the staff moving forward.
I think we do have a question in there, so we can punt it to August or do it depending on how this is running. I wanted to say, I mean, Priester, you guys already got the answer right with Freeman and how they've approached football seasons after a defeat. But I want to throw out, if you want to say the beginning of the season to the end, we went from August 17th being told by everybody and their brother that Kenny Minchie won the starting job, and now CJ Carr is going to be a Heisman candidate going into next season. that's a pretty big change from just before the season started to now, because CJ Carr he had the best rookie year for a rookie, not true freshman, but rookie year for a Notre Dame quarterback. So that's an accomplishment. Next question from NDBG SoCal. What will the impact on the 2027 recruiting class be from not making the playoffs?
Pete, do you have
do you think this
minimal?
Yeah.
Because I think that the run to the national title game still plays, even though it's a year old. But there's no doubt, like, it would have been boosted by playing for the national title again. I mean, now somebody else is going to get that shine. So I think look, USC had the #1 recruiting class. I don't think they played in the college football playoff last year, if I'm not mistaken. So it's not like it can't be done. But I would to miss out on having Notre Dame football being a national advertisement for a month, which was huge last year. I mean, we're reading national stories about, is Notre Dame likable now? Holy crap, I can't believe this is happening. To miss out on all that is significant. Doesn't need to be like a death knell to the class, but I think you got to acknowledge somebody else is going to pick up that shine that you got last year.
I think that's a really good point. I would note this year much different than last year in that you should have Jeremiah Love in New York this weekend for the Heisman. So that's recruiting advertising that you're going to get plastered in the media capital of the world and all over the sports consciousness this weekend that was not present for Notre Dame a year ago. Also, then Jeremiah Love is a bona fide lock, first round pick, probably top 5, top 10 pick. You're going to get much more draft love out of that. So I do think there are some other factors that make it mitigating the damage of not being in the CFP. And again, like, Notre Dame not only has opened new doors, but Notre Dame's got a level of cool with recruits that it's not had in recent years. Jeremiah Love and how his charisma and just the way he carries himself, all of that's not going to do anything but help Notre Dame over the ensuing months, beginning as soon as this week.
Pete, I think I'm going to answer this one too, Tim. Pete, I think that if JMU could maybe win the national championship and take all that shine, it wouldn't hurt Notre Dame recruiting quite as much.
No,
as someone like Georgia.
It's not, that shine can't go to everyone equally. Like, they're.
Yeah. I wanted to point out that my answer is less than because of last year, but it will hurt a lot if they don't go to the playoff next year. It'll be a lot. It'll be a painful.
Question from Factor 37. The last time Notre Dame felt scorned was when Brian Kelly left for LSU. That led to highly compensated assistant coaches, Shields Hall, and a strong commitment to Freeman in the program. What can come from this scorn that would aid the program? Greater NIL, the ability to take more transfers?
Even greater NIL is definitely part of it.
They already have greater NIL.
Yeah, you have to go even greater, more great.
Yes, so you have to strenuously object. Yeah, I don't think that
you strenuously object.
Yeah. Well, in that case, I don't think that there's because if A then B situation here the way that there was with Brian Kelly, Marcus Freeman, and LSU, and that's fine. I don't think Notre Dame's suddenly gonna open the doors to everybody, because their admissions is already a great partner with the football program. And this was something that I talked to an agent last Friday night, and we were just sort of discussing the Giants and Marcus Freeman and where it's all going and Pete Pavakwa, and he's like, look, what I told you in the summer holds true today. Marcus Freeman wants for nothing at Notre Dame. Nothing. Notre Dame has a administration and a board of trustees whose approach is basically hey, we think NIL for the football program is going to go to, I'm just going to throw out a number, 30 million next year. And the approach from Notre Dame is well, why don't we just go to 40 or 50? They're trying to go so hard at this that I don't think what happened this weekend has a whole lot of impact on that. Now, is it a ready-made motivational tactic for Lauren Lando and Marcus Freeman all off season? Yes, but I don't know at the trustee NIL university level if there's a whole lot here.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I would note that you referenced the relationship with admissions, and you and I have both talked about that previously on this podcast and through the years. That also reflects a lot of trust. So I think because there's so much trust in Marcus Freeman and his guidance of the program and who he's recruiting, that when he does go to them and say, let's drill down on this admission. Here's why. That's why they're receptive. And that's why you've seen a couple of guys that have ended up decommitted and go to Michigan or wherever. But that's why you see there's real trust there because it's an authentic relationship, is the way it was indicated to me.
Yeah, this we've talked about this on podcasts before, and the question came up like, okay, so what's next? What does Marcus Freeman need next? And Pete, JB, I think you were out of town, Tim, for that last meeting with Bavacqua, but it was like it's all right there. You know, this is a blow. The goodwill and yeah, I mean, December and January of last year was like a dream for Notre Dame football. The publicity that came with it, Notre Dame's likable again, and you know, yeah, like and then plus with Marcus Freeman, I mean, everybody loved Marcus Freeman, so it's like people that previously hated Notre Dame love Notre Dame. So you know, I don't know that it's anything dramatic. Maybe avoiding a situation like that just happened yesterday, where you're not even going to a bowl game and making the playoffs, but that's beyond Notre Dame's control. But look, they're heading. They continue to be not just headed in that right direction, but on a real high note here. What happened yesterday certainly is a blow in the short term.
And read just the first part of this question because Pete Sampson suggested we use the second part for a different podcast. So we're going to do that, Pete Sampson. I'll make sure you are on that podcast, said podcast. Kaiser Wilhelm says, is Chris Ash flying under the radar in the blame game? Fact of the matter is there were 2 actual games of importance this season, and the defense badly underperformed in both. I will point out there were 3 when you throw USC out there. The other teams weren't good enough to beat Notre Dame's defense. I agree with.
No, I mean, the first half of Purdue was not great either. It just like the fact that it took the defense a quarter of the season to know what it was doing at an efficient way that's not an example of like great coaching. I realized they got a lot better and they had some young players who improved along the way, which everyone else has too. So yeah, I think that ultimately when Pete Bavacqua says like, what did he say? Like, we never had a chance. And, you know, after going 0-2, I mean, he's kind of right, but like you went 0-2. Like you got to wear that. And I don't know how much Bavacqua was going to admit to that in the press conference tomorrow. I would hope that Marcus Freeman, whenever we get him next, would say something similar to what Clark Lee said, is like, look, we had our opportunities.
Yeah. We
lost to Alabama and Texas, and we got to own that. Because ultimately, like, especially for the football coach, it's different for the AD.
Yeah,
for the football coach,
Bavacqua might not need to say that.
You got to look down at what's in front of you, opposed to the AD, who I think has to look out kind of over the horizon.
We all knew they had to win. You couldn't lose both.
Yeah,
you had to win one of them. And now, I mean, look, you should be in the playoffs despite losing those first 2. And no, they weren't ready to play defensively. It's the remarkable thing is how good they are now after the way they played the first 10 quarters, that you could flip that switch. And again, the switch was flipped beginning against some really good offenses. Now, Arkansas, because of their head coaching situation and the imminent firing, that put a different slant on it. But man, that was a very powerful offense they were dealing with, and they gave up.
You know who was not impressed by the Arkansas win?
Yeah, I can think of someone.
Athletic director didn't seem to notice it ever happened. Did you hear him?
I didn't hear his comment about that. No. Your check? What?
Go ahead, JB.
No, I was actually just going to say, certainly understandable to examine what caused slow start on the defensive side of the ball, and you think about the bus and the miss. But I would say in assigning blame that Chris Ash had nothing to do with Jeremiah Love only getting 10 carries against Miami.
Yeah, your check didn't seem to be all that impressed with
yeah.
what I was saying, Tim.
No. Well, yeah. So Denbrock, they weren't ready to play their best football at the beginning.
It's not
of the
one
season.
thing.
They just weren't.
It's
No.
not
Never
one
one thing.
It's not one thing. It's not one thing that Tyler Buckner dropped the ball, because I know Greg McElroy brought that up, because Donovan Hinish was then held, and at least it's 4th and 25 instead of 4th and 10 in that, or 4th and 11, whatever it was. But I just want to point out, like, there is a little bit. There's truth to this too with Chris Ash. You can't be. He didn't have an overhaul he had to do with the defense.
No.
They had to be
No,
better
you're
than they
right.
were.
No, that's correct. I mean, and it's fair. It's a fair analysis.
I want to point out too that, like, whether this is fair or not, the committee being asked to go back and watch the beginning of the season and seeing Carson Hobbs and other people chasing people everywhere was not a good look for Notre Dame either. If you really want to,
That was referenced specifically in his press teleconference after the fact. Was like, when we went back and watched the game, we saw Notre Dame's DBs chasing Miami's receivers all over the field.
Todd Schuler's only game in his life where he does something like that, dude.
Leonard Moore gets beat on a double move. Like, all right.
I would have sworn Jay Bateman had been hired as a DC.
Yeah. Playing the wrong coverages. Like, yeah, it's just not good.
Where are we at?
I think it's on me now.
All right, JB.
Question from Do Your Job 23. In 2026, will we actually see the elite offensive line that keeps being hyped? Because outside of one play last playoffs, they couldn't run the ball, and they didn't look elite in the 2 games that mattered this year. Gentlemen, the floor is yours.
Well, there's no doubt that when the season started, I mean, it was an offensive line that you had really high hopes for, but it was not an experienced offensive line. And so they made progress in that area. I can't tell you that it's going to be elite next year, but it's certainly trending in that direction. Sounds like, I don't think we mentioned this, but in the players that Pete Bavacqua was mentioning that wouldn't be available for the bowl game, he did mention Price Love, which of course we all knew. Raritan makes sense because he's had the two ACLs, and he mentioned Emil Wagner. Now Notre Dame has a ton of talent, ton of young talent, unproven, certainly not as experienced as Wagner because he started the last 28 games for Notre Dame. But they will hit the ground running in a much better fashion than they did this year. Tim, do you remember how many career starts they had combined when the season began?
No, I think this year was pretty good. It was last year. I mean, Wagner and Knapp started all last year. Schroth started all 2 years. Craig only started 3. There was one new starter. I think I think they're reasonably veteran line this year. It was 2 years ago they had 6 starts. Knapp had 15, Wagner had 16, Schroth probably had 20.
Yeah,
like 3.
Miami and A&M had an absurd amount of starts returning.
If they lose Wagner for any reason, there goes what you just say, Tim. 28 starts. I mean, they're not replacing him with a longtime starter if they lose Anthony, if they lose Wagner. So, I mean, will there be an elite offensive line? If the line comes back with like every combatant, I think they should be an elite offensive line. If you lose Wagner, and when did Craig get hurt again? October? It's different than September. I mean, you got to get him back fully.
About the same as last year, just like 2 weeks later, maybe.
2 weeks later, he got hurt in like the Traore range. That's
early October.
Yeah, I don't know. I that's a great question for the spring. Not to punt that question, but they probably. I think their offensive line was good enough to go out there and get them to the semifinals this year, and then you would hope the semifinal team would play their best game that day, or they would lose.
Yeah. It's I think if you had a line of some combination of Lambert, Jagasa, Craig, Schrouth, and Knapp, that would be a really, really good offensive line.
Hey, it may not have been elite this year, but it sure as hell was ahead of Alabama's offensive line. So,
did you see the tweet that came out that said rushing yards today by the SEC?
Yes.
Notre Dame outrushed Alabama in the SEC.
Yeah, Georgia had a really good day, and then everybody else had 0.
Because Notre Dame had
-3. It's really incredible that they felt like that. I mean, I guess you're supposed to laugh or cry. What's the saying? You can't laugh.
Yeah. I would just briefly say I agree with Pete's sentiment there, and we'll see about Schrouth. Obviously, that injury, I think he was trending toward the NFL before the injury. Now, I think that's a little less clear. But you have Will Black waiting in the wings that people just continue to rave about him, his potential, his upside. So there are options there. Again, they have recruited the O-line and the secondary as well as anywhere they've recruited since Marcus Freeman.
Yeah, and I mean, think of the progress that Absher and Otting made in their games during the second half of the season is significant. So, yeah, I mean, we'll see. They won't have Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price running behind them, and we'll see how that impacts Notre Dame's running game. We have a question from Kyle Sutphin. Can you give some insight into the expected roster turnover and any transfer target news as of this moment?
I mean, you would figure at minimum half the running back room is gone. Probably just a touch more than that, maybe not. I mean, you could get both Williams and Young back. James isn't going anywhere, but half the running back room is gone. I would say I would be surprised if Jaden Greathouse returns, but I'm saying that in a 55% way, not in an 85% way. So you could lose 3 of your top 4 if he still counts because he didn't play, but he is 3 of your top 4 receivers. As Pete pointed out, Ty Washington gave you a reason to want him to come back, so you probably should only lose Eli Raridan from that room. Flanagan will be healthy, which is great, and Flanagan will be older. Other Flanagan, the firm of Flanagan and Flanagan with Washington is a nice little trio there. And I mean, Wagner is a giant. Wagner and Charlotte are massive decisions. You don't want to lose both to the NFL.
I think you just got to get 1 out of 2.
Just get one.
Let's be realistic about it.
Right. Schroff, JB, that's a great point. He was trending that way, but boy, Billy Schroff could be a guy that comes back and like Ronnie Stanley and Joe All never had to come back. Quentin Nelson. Schroff could come back and be the Zach Martin first team All-American 5th-year senior. That would not be crazy to think Billy Schroff comes back to Notre Dame.
Yeah, and especially, the guard market probably will yield a little bit more for Billy Schroff at the collegiate level in 26 than what it would be as a mid-round draft pick in the NFL. I realize those are multi-year deals, but he could play himself into, who knows, top 50 draft consideration for 27. So that's one I'm going to continue monitoring closely. We know Kenny Minchie will go into the portal. I think that's inevitable. And then I think Notre Dame's definitely already identifying some wide receivers in the portal that it intends to target. I also think that Notre Dame's going to, as we alluded to last week, enter into some NIL renegotiations with players. And the way a different power conference GM explained it to me was like, a lot of times, especially if it's a fierce battle for a guy, you overpay the first year and then you renegotiate based on what your roster needs are, how that guy has performed after you've had him in your program for a year, and frankly, how much money you have. So I think I know there will be some roster renegotiations for some Notre Dame people.
We could do a whole podcast on who to overpay for and not overpay for, but I would overpay for the tandem of Schuler and Johnson. I think you enter that next season because Leonard Moore's coming back. So I think you enter the next season, have 3 of those. It'd be great if Christian Gray comes back, but I'm saying if you're overpaying Schuler and Johnson. I'm not overpaying Gray as opposed to Schuler and Johnson. They seem like they're very necessary players on that back end.
Well, Schuler's that's a decision that has to, I mean, you got to make sure that you keep him.
And Johnson.
Johnson's still just kind of getting started, but
I think Tay Johnson could. I think Tay Johnson's coming back to Notre Dame, of course, but Tay Johnson's going to get offers like crazy.
Yeah, he will. And Schuler, I think, has always kind of had an eye on when he can get to the NFL sooner rather than later.
Yep.
So you're going to have to overpay for him if it comes down to that.
Our next question is from ND Dan 106. The offseason has officially started. What will Notre Dame need to do in December and early January to ensure there is no doubt in the selection committees next year? Does it start with keeping Mickens and Ash?
Sorry, T.O. I was supposed to read that.
I know. You got to space out. You have an important life with phone calls and those type of things coming in a lot.
So what are they going to do now that will ensure 12 months from now?
No, does it start with the coaches? I think they're saying.
No, I know. The first part of the question.
I think continuity is key. I don't think the way that you closed that season playing defense that you would remotely want to have to contemplate hitting the reset button again for a third different coordinator in 3 years. We saw how much that limited the offenses under Marcus Freeman on that side of the ball his first 3 years as head coach. So I think that's key. And I think the longer they can hold on to Mike Mickens, the better it is for player development, the better it is for play on the field, the better it is, I think, for the culture in the Goog. But I also know that there have been some programs that are looking for defensive coordinators that have already been sniffing around on Mike Mickens in recent weeks. So Notre Dame is invested in keeping him. As we've reported several months ago, when he didn't get the defensive coordinator job at Notre Dame, he did get a raise into that seven-figure club, and he got a 3-year deal. So Notre Dame has made it clear they prioritize Mike Mickens.
I'd like to join Leonard Moore in that seven-figure club as well with Mike Mickens at the end of this football season.
Yeah, I'd say it starts with keeping the staff together, and then use this unexpected break in football to like really nail your portal evals, and then go from there. But in terms of the no doubt for next year, don't lose 2 games. You look at the schedule; they shouldn't. I mean, like next year's schedule is bad. They have to go 11-1 next year, and I realize there's this memorandum of understanding about in next year's bracket, if they finish in the top 12, they're automatically included, and that's great until the committee moves them to 13th in the final rankings.
Yeah, that's a great point.
I'm just like
That's why
it is the most worthless bit of like, oh well, we fixed this. No, you didn't.
Well, that's why I say, what do they have to do now to assure 12 months from now?
Oh yeah, okay. I didn't realize what you're getting at there.
I'm not sure there's anything you can do if they're going to make the decision that they just made yesterday.
Yeah, you got to go 11-1.
I was wondering what you were getting at with that pre-show. I'm like, what do you mean?
No, I mean, like,
you're right.
What can they do now? Tell me what the committee's going to do on vote number 6 as opposed to 1 through 5.
I should point out, Bryce, I think you were trying to hint at this, but Kenny Minchie has reportedly entered the transfer portal while we were on this podcast. But that's not exactly, I mean, while it's breaking news, it's not exactly, if someone deserves to enter the transfer portal and look around, I think Marcus Freeman, Gino Guidugli, and CJ Carr and Kenny Minchie would all be in agreement with Irish fans that Kenny Minchie should get a chance to make a life for himself out there.
And he will have a robust 7-figure market. I'm still trying to wrap my head around you. I'm still trying to wrap my head around you moments ago, O'Malley, saying you're ready to take a pay cut. But anyway, last question.
That's just me and Wagner. We're the only ones that have to do it. There is no. Oh, I want to throw in the non-real world opinion of Mike Mickens and what he should do. If he brings back Leonard Moore, Adon Schuler, and Tay Johnson, and let's say Christian Gray too, he should coach one more year at Notre Dame and then decide whatever defensive coordinator job he wants, because that secondary with Mike Mickens absolutely insane. Taking his defensive coordinator jobs.
Yeah.
Final question. Broken Irish fan. I didn't realize that when I took it. Broken Irish fan. Wow. Why should Jeremiah Love win the Heisman? Why should Fernando Mendoza win the Heisman? Why should someone else?
Jeremiah Love should win the Heisman because he's the single best player in the game right now, in my opinion. Fernando Mendoza, I believe, will win the Heisman because he's the quarterback of the undefeated #1 team and has a story that people seem to be enamored with, coming from Cal to Indiana and being part of this historic transformation in college football that's entirely unprecedented. So that's where I feel that.
I don't have a vote. If I did, I would go Pavia, Love, Mendoza. I think that what Pavia did at Vanderbilt is like it's just an incredible story. Not sure what that would look like in New York with his crew, but anyway, that would be. I love what Pavia took Vanderbilt from a just hopeless wreck to they went 10-2, and he's like the whole offense in a way that Mendoza is not at Indiana.
Well, that's true. Indiana was a hopeless mess too, but
yeah.
Mendoza wasn't the quarterback last year. Pavia was, so I get what you're saying. Jeremiah Love's the best player. Exactly what JB said. Jeremiah Love's the best player. Mendoza's probably going to win it because of everything that we saw transpire on Saturday and the whole season. Indiana's it's such an incredible story. It's absurd for the losingest program in the history of college football to do what they've done under Cignetti is just absurd.
I had someone contact me when I tweeted out, like, in fact, 365 days ago you could say this, 410 days ago you couldn't say this. Indiana defeated Ohio, undefeated Indiana defeated undefeated Ohio State to win the Big Ten championship, and is now the number one team in the country.
Yeah.
That was an impossible statement to make. Full stop. Ever. That's insane. It's incredible. Somebody texted me, is like, it's different with NIL. I'm like, what do you think they just beat? Do you think that what, Ohio State doesn't have any money? Like, it is different with NIL, but my God, they're playing in the Big Ten. It's amazing. Love is the best player in the country. That's why he should win the Heisman. To play the devil's advocate here, this is why they should win the Heisman. Fernando Mendoza should win the Heisman because of everything you guys said. He was also, I know, he wasn't great necessarily in the Penn State game, but he was super clutch. And he wasn't great against Ohio State, but nobody is, and he was super clutch. So Fernando Mendoza deserves it too. Pavia, Pete, great point. Julian Sayin had a heck of a year. I just think he has the second best player in this country on his team in Jeremiah Smith, and I think he might have the fourth best wide receiver in the country accompanying Jeremiah Smith. So I know that's not necessarily fair. Great players play with great players, but there's a lot of good Heisman candidates this year, and I cannot say who I vote is illegal. So that's that. Any predictions on who will win it? I think you guys already said it, right?
Yeah, I think it'd be Mendoza.
I got in trouble when I got in trouble.
Look, unless you're going to
I got in
predict
trouble
Carson
when I
Beck,
predicted.
I think you're in the clear here to vote for Mendoza.
Don't say Carson Beck or Ty Simpson. That's
I got in trouble when I predicted what the committee was going to do. So
well, we will be
I don't
back.
know that.
We'll be back on December 11th. Until then, for a owner of the business to the right, no, I'm just kidding. For Jim Priester on the right of your screen, John Bryce, who comically left, and Pete Sampson, thank you for joining us, watching and listening. Irish Illustrated Insider.